I'm Ashton Vincent. You're watching Press Watch 2016. Today we'll be talking about ethics in polling, Oklahoma state questions on the ballot, and comparing and contrasting presidential debates. All that and more on Press Watch. Hello and welcome to part one of a special two-part edition of Press Watch 2016. I'm Ashton Vincent, and joining us today is the Capitol correspondent of the Associated Press in Oklahoma City, Sean Murphy. Thank you for being here. And we also have the chair of the Departments of Political Science and History here at OCU, Dr. Richard Johnson.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I want to start off our discussion today about talking about political polling and the ethics that should be followed when we look at this element of elections. To get us started talking about this, let's take a look at a clip from Fox News' Hannity.
What do you
reasonable
say?
Position.
Because if you look at all the online polls, The Hill, Time.com, Slate, I mean, the list was really long. Trump won the debate in these online polls. Everyone's going to say, Hannity, they're not scientific. I hear what you're saying.
So there's a lot of talk about polls lately and the controversy that's going on with them. Can you talk a little bit about polling in this election?
Well, what we're seeing is a lot of things that are really more entertainment than they are scientific polling. I mean, I was looking at the whole idea of, I'm blanking on the exact type of the label, but where people try and measure what's going on right after the event.
A snap poll?
Yes, snap poll. And realize snap polls mean different things to political scientists. But snap polls are generally entertainment. Even the CNN poll that many people have talked about, I would refer to it as semi-scientific as opposed to meeting all the criteria that one would expect for a solid poll.
What criteria should polls meet?
People should be chosen randomly. People should not be allowed to participate more than once. The questions need to be clear, and the population needs to be well defined.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Murphy, can you elaborate on this a little bit more? Have you looked into polling and reporting on polls in your career?
Sure. Polls are a very effective way to add to a political story, give readers a sense of, which candidates are doing well. The clip that you referred to mentioned online polling, and these are polls that the AP avoids for some of the reasons that Dr. Johnson mentioned, because you really don't get a sense of who's participating in an online poll. A poll should be reflective of the voting demographic. I mean, the very good polls will take into account the racial breakdown. Are these likely voters? Are the number of registered Republicans and registered independents the same as the voting electorate? These are all important things to know about a poll. And of course, probably the most important thing to know is who paid for the poll. We don't use polls typically if they're paid for by a candidate or a special interest group. Usually a polling firm that's doing them on behalf of maybe another media outlet or something like that. So these are all important things to keep in mind when looking at polls.
Absolutely. Well, we have another video to take a look at if you'll direct your attention to the screens.
Why do you think multiple polls, scientific polls, have said Hillary Clinton won that debate by a 2-to-1 margin? I mean, it's not even been close.
All right, well, I got to set you straight on that one. The polls that happened that night, the night of the debate, the snap polls, the ones that happened online, those all showed Mr. Trump winning in a huge way.
What scientific poll had Donald Trump winning? Give me one scientific poll. Everything else was those are fan polls, man. Those are polls that like computer programmers can mess with.
Chuck,
those aren't real.
Immediate reactions. Those are variety.
Those are all like robot polling. It's not real polling.
Chuck, we have the support of the people. I mean, again, I understand that Hillary is going to have support from the insiders and from the media. Mr. Trump's going to have the support from the grassroots and from the people.
Jason, you've been doing this a while. You know those are bogus. These are bogus. There's nothing. They're beyond non-scientific. In fact, you have evidence. There's some evidence that there are computer programs that help refresh. All you have to do is empty your history and you get to vote again. They're not real, Jason.
Okay, Dr. Johnson, what do you think of this video?
I think that the moderator from Meet the Press is exactly on solid ground, and the representative from the Trump camp is trying to spin it.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you seen something like this? Is this normal behavior for the moderator the reporter in that video?
Well, Chuck Todd is a very well-respected journalist, and he's kind of, he has a reputation as a bit of a, a bulldog as a reporter. He doesn't let BS fly by, and that's what a good reporter does. A good reporter pushes back when, especially candidates, they want to paint things in a light most favorable to their candidate.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's their job, and that's what they do, and a good reporter will push back on that. And in this case, Chuck is right in terms of online polls. They can be manipulated. It doesn't reflect a true demographic. I mean, it could just be supporters of one candidate are more likely to use computers or more likely to visit the website where they were doing the poll. So that's one of the reasons the AP doesn't use online polls, and just another reason you just really need to be careful about which polls you're looking at.
Absolutely. From the Trump side of things, was it wise for him to send someone on the show to be there and try and back up and make a case for the polls that he was supposed to have won?
Yeah, you have to know going into a show like that how much pushback you're going to get, and of course, from what we see, it seems like he got caught a little flat-footed, but he did get it out there, made a case that, hey, these polls that I'm referring to showed my candidate did much better. And, that does kind of play into the whole narrative of the Trump campaign, that the media is, biased against him, and that maybe polls are biased against him. So probably didn't hurt him too bad.
Okay, well, that's very good. Dr. Johnson, is this typical within a political campaign for this situation to happen?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's why it's called a spin room, right? Immediately afterwards, you want to put the absolute best face on whatever's happened. Even if it's a disaster, you put a best face on it.
Very good. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about the method of polling. So if we have these polls that are not credible, can we talk a little bit more about that method?
It's basically a phone-in poll, or it's some sort of an online poll where people can participate at multiple points in time. It violates all the rules. It's entertainment. That's all it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that the average viewer would know that it's entertainment, or is that the job of the media to make that distinction?
I think that's an important role that the media plays. For example, the AP, we have very strict guidelines on polls that we can use, and one of the most important things, like I've mentioned, is who paid for the poll, how did they select the poll participants, and one of the most important things, especially in a political poll, is are these people likely voters, and how do they determine if they're likely voters? And then one of the other things that is important for us to keep in mind, and anyone really, is the margin of error of the poll. So, for example, if a poll result shows twice the margin of error that one candidate is leading, then it's safe for us to say that the poll shows that candidate was leading. If the poll result is within the margin of error, then we don't say one candidate is leading. And those are the kinds of things that are important to keep in mind. And then how the poll was conducted too. An online poll, or even a poll that calls participants and has them follow computer-generated prompts, not actually talking to a person. We need to stay away from those. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, coming up next, Press Watch's very own Jamison Kiefover with a special look at the Oklahoma State questions to keep you up to date and informed. All that and more when we come back.
Oklahoma isn't your room. So don't trash it.
Welcome back to Press Watch. Oklahoma's ballot is loaded with some state questions this year. Jamison Kiefover is here to walk through what questions would be yes or no's to our lawmakers.
The Oklahoma state ballot questions have been getting a lot of attention lately. There are 7 ballot questions, with 2 of them working together if passed. First, State Question 776 focuses on Oklahoma's right to perform executions and would rule that the death penalty is not cruel and unusual punishment. Next, State Question 777 addresses agriculture in Oklahoma. This amendment creates an extra protection for farmers and a limit on lawmakers' ability to interfere with agriculture exercises. Under this extra protection, no law can interfere with these rights unless the law is justified by a compelling state interest, which is a clearly identified state interest of the highest order. State Question 779 would raise the sales taxes by 1%. The tax revenue created would be divided between public school teachers and salaries and different levels of public education. Oklahoma ranks 49th in the nation for teacher salaries, and many school districts are struggling to find and keep qualified teachers. State Questions 780 and 781 will work together if passed. 780 will change the classification of drug crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. 781 will use the money saved to provide mental health and substance abuse services in Oklahoma. The saved money will be distributed to counties in proportion to their population. State Question 790 would repeal the article of Oklahoma's Constitution that prohibits public money or property benefiting or supporting a system of religion. Lastly, State Question 792 would amend the Constitution to allow grocery stores and convenience stores to sell wine and High Point beer. Currently, Oklahoma law restricts grocery and convenience stores to selling beer containing below 3.2% alcohol by volume, and liquor stores cannot sell cold beer or non-alcoholic products. If 792 is passed, the legislator must create licenses for businesses selling alcohol, and license holders must meet new requirements. It is important to know what is on your ballot before you get into the polling booth in November, and Press Watch is here to help keep you informed. I'm Jamison Kiefover. Back to you, Ashton.
Thank you, Jamison. Now, gentlemen, I'd like to hear your thoughts on some of these questions, in particular their coverage in media. Sean, we'll start with you.
Well, we here at the AP and other news outlets have covered pretty extensively, I think. There's a lot of money flowing into these a lot of these different state questions, and they're pretty significant state questions that will make some pretty, some of them anyways, some pretty significant differences. So there's a lot of TV advertising, a lot of money going into that. And of course, perhaps the one that's getting the most attention is the 1% sales tax. There's a lot of reasons that this, it's got a lot of opposition, it's got a lot of support. As your colleague indicated, it would generate a lot of money. Latest estimates I have from the Tax Commission show almost $600 million annually, all getting pumped into public education, including a $5,000 across-the-board raise for public school teachers, about 20% to public colleges and universities, and then some money for early education and also career technology centers. That's a big one because education, as your colleague indicated, teachers in Oklahoma do have one of the lowest pay rates, certainly in the region and also the country. The state has struggled, given the downturn economically, to keep pace with per pupil funding. So while they have made funding for public education, at least common education, K through 12, they have tried to keep that funding up. It hasn't kept pace with the rise in the number of students. And, that puts a lot of stress on teachers. They haven't received a raise in 8 or so years, I think, maybe close to a decade. And they are losing a lot of teachers. So all of these state questions would have a big impact on a lot of people.
You bring up some great points about education. Dr. Johnson, can you also talk about this matter?
Well, 792 is very interesting, and I read particularly the Daily Oklahoman. I was reading this morning, and there were a lot of letters to the editors about 792. And of course, we've seen a lot of people. There's been a lot of advertisements. David Warren being sort of the front person for this. He garners a lot of public focus. But the other side of this is it would make sales taxes really excessively high. And so you've seen people like the Chamber of Commerce, the City of Oklahoma City, the City of Tulsa, several people. And if you were to read today's Oklahoman, almost everyone is about 792 and people's opposition to it. So I wonder sometimes, I think it's a very common thing to say we need to have teachers paid better. There's no doubt about that question. But the how does matter.
Yes, that makes sense.
I think the other question that I think all the questions are very consequential, which is rather unusual. I think this may be the most consequential set of questions we've had since 1990, when I believe we did term limits that year.
Which have had a profound effect.
Oh, absolutely. Although not as much effect as what you'd think. There's not as many women or people of color as were predicated. But to me, the one that I find I struggle with the most is 777. And so, on one hand, I see Tom Coburn, who, if there's one person I respect in Oklahoma, and I think this is true of many Oklahoma voters, that Tom Coburn is a man of integrity. And so when he gets out there and is willing to run these advertisements, I think it says something. And so you have a lot of back and forth. And I think for the average voter, as well as I'll admit myself, I find it very hard to kind of cut through the clutter. If it's hard for me, it's going to be harder for the average voter.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Well, coming up next, Dr. Johnson and Mr. Murphy will stick around to help us compare and contrast the performances from the last presidential debates.
Some people don't think it's easy to be green. Audrey does it every day. Turn off appliances when they're not being used. Shut off the lights when you leave a room. Always recycle paper. Recycle plastic, too. Today, Audrey did her part in helping OCU conserve. It's that easy. Have you done the same? Visit okcu.edu/bluegoesgreen for more information.
Welcome back to Press Watch. Before we jump into comparing and contrasting presidential debates, I'd like us to take a look at a few clips.
I am quoting
Hillary, you
17,
have no idea.
17 do you doubt 17
our
military
country has
and
no
civilian
idea.
agencies? Well,
Yeah,
he'd
I doubt
rather
it. I doubt
believe
it.
Vladimir Putin than.
So this has been an interesting election, and these have been very interesting debates. Dr. Johnson, is this what you were expecting from these two candidates?
Pretty close, actually. I mean, I think Clinton delivered a consistent sort of message, and Donald Trump was a little erratic at points or undisciplined. The pattern that I saw is that he would start off well, really in all three debates, started off relatively well, and somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes he sort of trailed off or he sort of lost his discipline. I think that the moderators had a tough time with the debates. They certainly had my sympathy. And I thought Chris Wallace in the third debate really did a great job as compared to Lester Holt and the moderators in the second debate.
Very good. Mr. Murphy, what do you think?
Well, I certainly agree that watching the debate, as someone who has moderated a debate before, I couldn't help but sympathize with the moderator trying to, because it did seem like there was a lot of interrupting and a lot of, kind of attacks back and forth, people going off both candidates kind of going off script and jumping in, interrupting, and going over their allotted time period, which that can kind of throw a whole debate off if you start cutting into time and it limits the questions you can ask. So I did have some empathy there for the moderators.
Do you think there's a way to fix this time problem? It seems to come up every single year, more so this year. But do we have any creative ideas?
Other than shutting off their microphones now.
Oh my goodness. There's also a lot of lack of professionalism in these debates. Is that something that's typical in these debates?
I think this campaign and the debates are just symptomatic of what's going on, has more of a negative tone. As I'm talking to my classes, and we interact about this, the thing is, over and over again, it's about the negative tone and the very personal nature of the attacks. And we see less discussion of issues and more discussion of allegations and very uncivil behavior. I mean, really from both camps.
Absolutely. Let's talk some more about the treatment of moderators and the 3 moderators that we did have. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, these are obviously very professional journalists, well-trained. They're on TV, so they're used to that, kind of high-pressure situation. The preparation in a debate like this is critical because one of the things that I think that some of the moderators were criticized for was not pushing back enough on fact-checking. But it's not like in a situation like that during a live debate to actually fact-check someone, you pretty much have to know already what their response is going to be, have done the research beforehand, and then be able to recall that right away. That's not an easy thing to do. So if you ask a question of Hillary Clinton, you have to predict what she's going to say and then push back against it. So you have to be pretty well versed in all the issues and do a lot of research. It's certainly not an easy thing to do.
Out of all the moderators, who did you think did the best job?
I think I would agree that Fox's Chris Wallace in the last debate, he seemed to do a good job of pushing back on answers and making the candidates explain themselves a little more, not just letting them throw a quick sound bite or buzzword out there. Kept them on script as best he could, given the nature of this debate, which is it has gotten pretty nasty, and the 2 candidates really, especially by the time of that last debate, you could tell they don't like each other. They don't appear to like each other at all, and really don't respect each other. And so I think that's having to deal with that. I think he did a pretty good job.
Dr. Johnson, out of the 2 candidates, who do you feel prepared the best for the debates?
Hillary Clinton prepared better in the sense that she was consistent across the 3 debates. She knew details. And as she, I think, said in the first debate, I actually studied this because I want to be president. Not exact quote. Donald Trump was not as well prepared. I mean, he seemed to be somewhat inconsistent. He got better with each debate. I thought his last debate performance, he was very close to her, or if not on the same plane. But she was consistent across the debates. And so I'd give her the nod.
Does it bother you as voters that these candidates seem to dislike each other so very much?
Well, I guess when you're talking about the President of the United States, I mean, it's you do expect a level of civility and respect that maybe you're not seeing as much as, maybe an optimist would like. One thing I would like to throw in about the debates that's been the most fun for me is watching the Saturday Night Live impersonations of the candidates and the rehash of the debates.
You and so many others.
It's just, it's kind of a nice break from the intensity of the election and the debates and the candidates. And frankly, I think they do a really good job with it.
Very good. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this part of Press Watch. Join us again next time for part 2. Dr. Johnson and Sean Murphy will be with us again to continue our discussion.